Hello, YouTube. I have to have a bit of a somber opening today because, as you know, this past week, uh, BookTube suffered a major loss, and that was in the form of Shawn D Standfast, a great booktuber and a great person who had a big love of books and was a major inspiration, to me at least. Uh, I was a big fan of his channel, and I didn't know him personally. A lot of booktubers did know him personally or were friends with him. I tried to make a sort of commemoration video for him, but it felt wrong. It felt like I was just making it about myself. So this video is not a commemoration in any way. If you want something like that, then I suggest you go check out Michael K. Vaughan's video. He really gets to the heart of the matter, and it's a very heart-wrenching video. But as I said, I was still a big fan of his channel, so this news hit me hard, especially because I had talked to him in live streams before. So when I found out he was gone, I just realized that I really wished I could keep doing that and I could keep watching his videos and talk to him on occasion. So I still felt that it was appropriate for me to do something about that, and I felt that as just as somebody who's no more to him than like a viewer of his channel, I thought it'd be appropriate for me to just read a book. And that book I picked out was City. You know, his favorite book by his favorite author, Clifford D Simak, uh, and one that I had never read before. I had read a couple of stories by Clifford D Simak, not this one though. So I thought that it would be a good time to finally get to this book in honor of him, sort of a posthumous recommendation. The rest of this video will just be a review of this book. Uh, so let's get into it. What I think of this book? Well, it was a great book. Yeah, I loved it. I don't think that I'm exaggerating when I say that. For those of you who don't know, for those of you who don't watch Shawn D Standfast or maybe skipped a lot of his Clifford D Simak videos, this is a story that tells of the eventual fall of the human civilization on Earth. It doesn't quite go extinct. It's a bit more complex than that, but I don't want to get into spoilers here. It's a story that actually intertwines multiple different species, including dogs, which humanity has trained to speak, to express themselves, and they sort of, with the intent that their further evolution will go hand in paw to sort of help each other through this crazy world. And that idea the humans have sort of goes to plan, sort of doesn't. The dogs end up outliving the humans, actually. And this novel, the framing device is actually from the perspective of millions of years in the future, these old dog academics and scholars who are studying these stories that have been passed down from the ages. And they're so old that they don't think humans even exist. They think that they're just the denizens of mythology. So I'm going to read you a bit of the opening just so that you get a sense of this. And this is the opening of the book. This is under the little title that says Editor's Preface. These are the stories that the dogs tell when the fires burn high and the wind is from the north. Then each family circle gathers at the hearthstone, and the pups sit quietly and listen. And when the story's done, they ask many questions. What is man? They'll ask. Or perhaps, what is a city? Or, what is a war? There is no positive answer to any of these questions. There are suppositions and there are theories and there are many educated guesses, but there are no answers. In the family circle, many a storyteller has been forced to fall back on the ancient explanation that it is nothing but a story. There is no such thing as a man or city. That one does not search for truth in a simple tale, but takes it for its pleasure and lets it go at that. Explanations such as these, while they may do to answer pups, are no explanations. One does search for truth in such simple tales as these. Here then are the tales, to be read as you see fit, for pleasure only, for some sign of historical significance, for some hint of hidden meaning. Our best advice to the average reader: don't take them too much to heart, for complete confusion, if not madness, lurks along the road. And what that's sort of implying is that the dogs have so far outpaced human uh, ideas of civilization that they have completely different philosophy and ideas, such that make these stories kind of impenetrable to them. But to us as humans, it's perfectly understandable. So that's interesting because it sort of makes you think makes you think about the dialogue between you as a human and these alien creatures. It's sort of like the daydream little kids have that's like, if you went to an alien planet, how would you explain everything that's on Earth? And that's sort of how you feel reading these stories because you think about like, what is a human construct? What might not be a human construct? And that really gets to the themes of the book because this is a story about destiny and fate as it concerns the sociological perspective. And what I've said so far may seem a bit dark and depressing, uh, and in some ways it is. But really, the dark themes that I've talked about are merely a little bit of bitterness, uh, just to mix in with the much larger feeling that you'll get when reading this book, which is coziness, almost pastoral uh, pleasantry. It's sort of one of those post-apocalypses where the apocalypse is almost better than real life, well, the current real life. Because as the book goes on, the first several short stories, because this is a fix-up novel, the first several short stories are sort of disconnected and they sort of show humanity's slow decline. But then once the story sort of settles to its actual plot line, then you kind of get a few characters that you're really invested in, and then the story kind of uh, goes from there. And each story is obviously uh, a sequel to the one that precedes it. So it sort of finds its footing at a certain point. It settles in the narrative, which is an interesting way to do it because it makes you feel like you've come so far. Like by the time you're done with this book, even though it's this small, you'll feel like you have done so many things, met so many people, and seen so much because you really have. It's a story that uses only a few characters and a few settings to tell a very massive plot. And most of it is done through just conversations. This book kind of is a series of conversations between characters. There's not a ton of action. There's no like explosions or anything, or is situations or gradually escalating conflicts. It's a series of conversations between characters who are rarely in any immediate danger. There is a threat in this book. Lots of threats, actually. Many different species that I didn't tell you about that may or may not be kind, different people and characters that may mean harm for our heroes. And but the characters sort of plug along through it, and it's sort of easy for me to compare it to Terry Pratchett, which I don't know if comparing it to Terry Pratchett would be a disservice or not, uh, because this book came long before him. But I got into reading because of Terry Pratchett years ago, and it kind of reminds me of that because you get invested in these characters and these like weird philosophical ideas that they're talking about, and it's mostly it has that cozy vibe. It kind of feels like if Terry Pratchett was writing science fiction that was meant to be taken a little bit more seriously. But just like in his writings, there's this underlying like feeling of threat that kind of goes through the whole book. Like there's all these dark silhouettes on the horizon that kind of make you feel queasy, and all these big cosmological events that are about to have their conjunction. But even when those big sociological, cosmological events do happen, it's sort of there's something a little funny about them, especially in the final ninth story in this volume that's actually not included in this specific book. There's a thing that's actually kind of funny happens, but overall it's a little bit more serious than Terry Pratchett. It is a fix-up novel, by the way. As I've been telling you, mm, if you don't quite know yet, a fix-up novel is when an author takes a bunch of short stories that they've written originally meant to be own standalone things, and then combines them into a novel, usually sort of super glues them together with a framing device, which is sort of what the dog uh, academic uh, academic apparatus is in this book. But in other books, they sort of change the text a little bit to make the character names the same and stuff. The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury is a fix-up novel, and that was one that I reviewed a few months ago, and I really was disappointed by it because it didn't make sense. All the stories sort of had completely different settings. The Martians were completely different from story to story. Major parts of what should be the story of the colonization of Mars were completely skipped over or merely implied. But this book really fulfills what I thought Martian Chronicles was going to be. The stories gel together a lot more. I think you just heard my cat meowing just then. Pay him no mind. I am petting it, so you don't have to worry about. that. But okay, the stories gel together very well. Uh, the first four or so I mentioned are sort of distinct standalone stories that kind of feel like weren't written to be sequels to each other, but they still gel very well. And then the last part of the book, all the stories are obviously meant to be sequels to one another. So obviously that does make it a very effective fix-up novel because it's almost more like a serialization than uh, than a than a series of short stories that were put together. But that still affects the plot because there's a lot of stopping and starting, there's a lot of time skips, there's a lot of changes of setting and perspective, and that's kind of what you buy into when you get a fix-up novel. But as it comes to fix-up novels, this is probably the best that I've ever read. It has consistent themes, and the story progresses in a way that the time skips feel very justified, and they sort of add gravitas to the story, really. It does end a little bit abruptly, but like in a way that it gives more questions than answers and not in a good way, in my personal opinion. But I'll talk a bit more about that later. Um, well, it's a story about destiny, as I've said before, and fate, particularly in the racial, sociological sense. Each of the races in this book have a different fate and destiny. It sort of raises questions about like, is is humanity, what is nature and what is nurture, basically? What in humanity is learned behavior, and what in humanity is necessary to their continued existence? Like, will humans always create weapons and wage wars, or is that something that can be forgotten about? Because there's several different choke points in humankind's history portrayed in this book where they are encouraged to forget what came before or are trying to start over, reinvent themselves. And it comes, and then there's the dogs that they're also doing parallel evolution with, which makes you wonder, will the dog's instincts be affected by man? Like, will the dogs be able to exist without man and stay the same, or will man stand forever beyond them, or maybe they were always their own thing and man didn't affect them that much? And there's just a lot of questions about that. I want to read another little excerpt. This will be the last one, just to show you a bit how this book deals with it, because there's a lot of conversation here. But I want you to think this over, says one character to another, because this book is a series of conversations. A million years ago, man first came into being, just an animal. Since that time, he has inched his way up a cultural ladder. Bit by painful bit, he has developed a way of life, a philosophy, a way of doing things. His progress has been geometrical. Today, he does much more than he did yesterday. Tomorrow, he'll do even more than he did today. For the first time in human history, man is really beginning to hit the ball. He's just got a good start. The first stride, you might say. He's going a lot farther in a lot less time than he's come already. Maybe it isn't as pleasant as Jupiter. Maybe not the same at all. Maybe humankind is trapped compared to the life forms of Jupiter. But it's man's life. It's the thing he's fought for. It's the thing he's made himself. It's a destiny he has shaped. I hate to think, Fowler, that just when we're good and going good, we'll swap our destiny for one we don't know about, for one we can't be sure about. And that's one character talking to another about about the interplay of keeping your own personal history and identity and trying to grab at a new fate, at a new version of yourself. Sort of raises the question, maybe it's, is it better to control your own destiny, or do you have to stay connected to your history? Is it good to sever that history, or when you sever that history, do you remove a part of yourself in the grand species sense? And that theme is revisited a few times in this book, and it's a very interesting theme. This book is very packed with questions like that because it is a collection of short stories. There's a bit of stop and go, like some questions are brought up and then dropped again and then brought up again. It really can be a bit detrimental because of the way the short stories were written all separately. You can't necessarily start a question in chapter one, keep going, and then answer it by the end. You sort of have to do a bunch of hops throughout the book. But it, it it manages it very well, I think, because all the themes are kind of intertwined. And they all sort of make sense with each other. There are a few points in the book where I'm asking questions or I feel like something is being done that's sort of contradicting what came before. But by the end, it kind of makes sense. Uh, one last thing to talk about with this book is that this book contains 8 stories, but there is a ninth one. It's just that this book, this hey kitty, this specific volume was published in 1953, and down here it says complete and unabridged. Well, that was at the time because 20 years later, in 1973, Clifford D Simak wrote a ninth tale for this book called Epilogue. Yeah, spelled like analog, like EPILOG, not EPILOGB, like the way epilogue is normally spelled. Uh, and it is sort of a new ending for the book, which I really welcomed because, as I've said, the ending for this book leaves more questions than answers, and not in a good way, personally, in my opinion. So I appreciated the extra ending for introducing some new, finishing off some of those interesting concepts and sort of bringing a more final push to the end of the book. Although maybe a bit too much finality, I kind of agree with Clifford D. Simak in that the the epilogue is a bit too final, but I think I do like the open-endedness that the book has already, but I feel like the things that we saw in epilogue were sort of necessary to finishing out the story in a satisfying way. So if I was you and I was going to look out for City and I was going to read it for the first time, I'd definitely try to see if I can also find epilogue. It's not in a ton of editions of the book, but make sure to search for it. Tale number 9, epilogue. And if you're like me and you don't have ready access to it, look up an audiobook for City on YouTube. It might have it in there. That's what I did. Come on, kitty. Come on, come over here. Here. Okay, I'm gonna show you this cat. He's been talking to me the whole video. Look at him. Oh, isn't he just a beautiful orange boy? Mm. Okay, I think that's enough time. He's probably gonna keep meowing throughout the video. He wants me to go upstairs and sit on the couch with him. I'll do that in a second. Oh, that's the end of my sticky notes. Well, okay, just to finish it off, this was a great book, and I really liked it. I can see why it's been considered a classic of science fiction. I do think it's better than The Martian Chronicles, just as a fix-up novel, but also just as a single cohesive piece of art. It's much more successful, and I think the themes are deeper and more interesting than a lot of other science fiction books that I read from this era. So I would definitely recommend it to all of you, and I'm glad and thankful that Shawn uh, recommended this book to me, if in a very vicarious way, just by talking about it so much. Uh, and I would like to pass that recommendation on to anybody watching this video who enjoy paperbacks from this time, or maybe were thinking about reading it themselves. So thank you so much for making me read this book, Shawn. and you will be missed. Oh, well, see you later, BookTube. I'll see you all the next time I decide to upload a video months from now. Okay, bye.